I would say it would have been to do with football. I play it from the earliest day. Whatever it was about football or any ball sport, to be honest with you, I think I always looked at them slightly differently, and I was probably able to do things with footballs and stuff that, from a skill point of view, that probably weren't normal in funny ways, but I used to practice obsessively. So I suppose from a creative point of view, it would have been, I think, in sport, because the way I would look at pitches, even from a very young age, I don't look at pitches as being flat sort of rectangles. Pitches are three-dimensional. So the space is, when you have a ball, actually the least important thing you should be thinking about is the ball at your feet. It's about everything else. So there's an infinite number of possibilities and things you can do with it. And I used to think about these things all the time as to where you can put a ball and what you can do with it. And I think I would say it was probably football.
It's really interesting. So far, I haven't had anything like that, because it makes total sense as well. Like, usually that question always returns an answer that's like, used to draw as a kid, I used to write as a kid. It's something that's an obvious form of creative expression. Whereas I think that, I suppose it's kind of like, it's a sports football version of non-linear thinking, like where there is a box painted onto the field, but if you think beyond that, we're living in three dimensions. There's up, there's down. And I think being in the room with this work as well, like I've seen it obviously digitally, but the notion of like space and depth and like hearing that answer and then seeing your expression through this medium, there's a connection.
I think as I've got older, I'm nearly 60 now, and hindsight and maturity and age is an interesting thing, because you begin to think about what you've been doing or why you do what you do. And you begin to realize you've been doing the same fucking thing all your life in different formats. It just comes out in different ways. And I suppose with football, or I suppose with anything, I had this, always for me, there was a better way of understanding of how to pass a ball or get a ball or to do whatever or to do. And it was great winning. But fundamentally, it was never my goal, interesting enough, even though I am hugely competitive. It was actually, there is no greater feeling than walking off of a pitch wrecked. I haven't had a great game.
Yeah.
Even if you got beaten. It's better than winning 8-0 and it just been average.
Yeah.
That's not, you hadn't pushed yourself. And I think, my dad was in the textile business and used to have all these samples of textiles of all different types, and Nairn Dunbar tiles of like fur and stuff, like fake fur and stuff like that, or and my mum had a wool shop. When I was injured as a kid, I learned how to knit. So I ended up knitting these massive scarves. Just Doctor Who back then had a huge massive scarf. I just used to knit these like 12-foot scarves because I didn't know how to knit corners. I just knitted straight lines with all sorts of random pieces, and that actually became quite cultish in that people wanted them. I also then used to make clothes out of pieces of fabric and staple them together, and it was fun. If you look back, they were going, is he weird?
It sounds like the physicality, though, of the process is important for you. Looking around at the scale of these pieces, it makes sense that
these are my smaller ones.
Yeah, right. Which is, again, to the point, that feeling of coming off a pitch, like when you're wrecked and you're all like, something of a size like this, which is huge, demands that kind of approach, I feel.
Yeah. My work is hugely physical.
Right.
I have no interest, even though I can do it, in the technicalities. And this is probably heresy for many people. I don't know. I actually doubt it. If I sit down and plan what I'm going to paint or whatever, it will be shit. Because it will be what I plan. And that's as interesting as I get. So the end result might be very beautiful, but if I've started out to execute something that I've planned, it's going to sound weird, it's not interesting. My process starts with nailing a skin or canvas to a wall, say it's the unstretched or whatever, and
Right.
just going for it. I don't even pre-plan the colors or the whatever. I actually just let that flow. And so for me, painting, I don't bring thought into it. Thought is a barrier for me, because then it's really about the doing.
Yeah.
So my creative process is doing.
Yeah.
So I start by doing.
Mm.
And when I get going, and it's a physical thing, and the work is hugely physical. And it's a bit like, I love being wrecked after 8 hours.
Yeah.
I love being knackered. It's just a great feeling. But for me, my creativity comes out of the act of painting, the physical act of doing, because stuff happens.
Yeah. Even in terms of a writing thing, it's always the thing of like, sit down, and the act of writing is a form of physical thinking. You think you can sit down and come up with everything in your head first, but there's nothing like the physical process of actually writing something on a page that's going to get you thinking about the idea, and probably in a better, more reactive, emotional way than you would, as you say, than like sitting down and being like, well, what I'll do is this. And also, I feel like the whole point of the process is, a lot of the time, I mean, almost all the time, is that exploration of something that you don't know. Like, I'm a big, as I said, fan of writing, and one of my favorite writers, George Saunders, has a good quote about like that process of being like, if you set out to write a story about two dogs fucking, and you write a story about two dogs fucking, you wrote a story about two dogs fucking, you know? And I think that's only something you can really understand as well when you are part of that creative process, which is something, it sounds like most things in creativity, I find it sounds paradoxical when you're approaching it, being like, well, why would that make any sense in that way? Like, surely the best thing to do, like everything else in life, it would seem, is to sit down and plan it out so that you can get a sense of how good it will be before you begin. But I think with something like this, you only get this kind of output and experience as a person absorbing it when it comes from that raw moment.
I think so. And I'm a massive believer, by the way, in everyone is different.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own way. There is no wrong. There is no right. There is just is. It just is. And in a funny way, I don't set out. If I was drill down, if I was on a shrink's couch or something like that, it's funny. What I do, the absolute purpose, I suppose, at the end of the day, isn't to create paintings. If I was to be brutally honest with myself,
No.
and I have to be true, it's actually the journey. I used to say, like, I love playing football. I love kicking a ball. I'm really bad at watching it. I don't hang my work a lot in my studio and stare at it. It's the process. Part of my problem is when I've finished a piece, and it's great. If I'm anxious, which I get, or whatever, or I'm bored or whatever, or I'll take it out and I'll go at it again. Because for me, the painting process is more interesting than the finished thing. So I suppose for me, it's that whatever it is, the 6 weeks it takes to create a piece, or the 6 days, or the whatever it is, that journey for me is my process, is my art, not the end thing.
Yeah. Did you always start big when you were doing this kind of stuff? Was that a major thing, or was that not really a thought?
Oh, I just painted, and I worked, and I don't think, and I, for my own, back in the 80s or 70s or whatever, when I said, like, you just mess it, you worked with what you did, right, what you had. But as I developed in the 90s, whatever, I just found myself, I had a real interesting, I've always had our Irish culture, it's very funny when it comes to things like painting or visual arts or even anything. I think we're hugely scared of scale. It's like we still live in the world of know your place. Like, we don't do high rise, and we make excuses about skylines, which is total bollocks. We just don't have the balls to do it. We don't have the bravery around architecture, or they wanted to pull the Pigeon House towers down. They're only built in the early 70s, but they're so ugly, they're beautiful.
Right.
I mean, they're just beautiful, because actually they're nothing to do with the physical structure. They're just they become this thing. You go to other cities, and this classical architecture beside a skyscraper, beside a we haven't gone there yet. We suddenly go to an economic model.
Yeah.
Or we suddenly go to, so I think when it comes to painting, we have a very similar attitude. I think we're scared of big.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, go, I could never fit that in my house, whatever.
Yeah.
Of course you could fucking fit it in your house.
Yeah.
You just need to move the plug.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go to many countries and places, and people have these massive pieces of 1-bedroom apartments.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not scared of it.
Right.
Where we tend to, I'm not trying to down on I'm scared. It's just, I don't think, and I think that comes from somewhere deep down, a lack of confidence in ourselves, particularly in the visual arts.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, I still think we need to, there's a sense even amongst the artists, the art community, is about knowing your place.
Yeah.
And we're not the leaders.
It's interesting. I think it feeds into a lot of other, maybe why our humor is such a prevalent part of like, as a culture, like that self-deprecating ability has sort of gotten out of our hands, where it began with like a tool and now it's something that controls us. You know what I mean? Like you actually can't escape that feeling of wanting to denigrate yourself, or like not be showing off, or not stand out and be big in that kind of way. You want to be sort of inward.
Really interesting listening to you there, because you associated showing off and being big.
Right.
It's really interesting. And that actually sums it up. Scale is somehow showing off.
Right.
Why are you doing that? What is it? Because it just looks fucking great, or it's actually fun.
Yeah.
And for me, actually, it's very interesting. So as I've developed and got bigger and bigger, I got huge joy, a huge pleasure out of the painting so big. When you get to one end of it, you've forgotten what the other end looks like,
Right.
which is brilliant. Because big paintings, you have to sometimes be 20 foot back to see them.
Yeah.
So you actually don't.
Yeah.
Which actually is really interesting in terms of how you work it. But I got huge joy and huge challenge from that, and to see if I could create. And the way I paint, is that right if I stand?
Yeah.
The way I paint is I paint a lot on the ground.
Yeah.
Very physical. As I got older, I put more on the wall because it's, my back starts to really get bad.
Right.
But when I put it, I nail it or whatever. But I will re-nail this, take it down, re-nail it, switch it this way. But it's hugely physical, and the different sort of the different directions.
Yeah.
So then you get, a canvas like that.
Right.
That's sold actually, so I should take care of it.
That's amazing.
But I tried to, it's funny, when I was a younger person, or whatever,
Right.
I was trying to paint. So go back to football and sport.
Yeah.
Go back to thinking. Go back to our minds. I was trying to paint within the confines of the four of the edges.
Yeah.
And I found myself really struggling, and I found myself really uninterested.
Yeah.
But the paintings were shit.
Right.
And actually then I realized, no, what I need to do is paint like it's a big fucking painting, except it's small painting.
Right.
So a lot of the bigger paintings end up with massive,
Right.
it's 4 times the amount of paint on the wall or the floor than there is.
Yeah.
But then a work like this, which is small, that was in New York, whatever, it's part of Screaming for Joy. But I paint it like,
Right.
it's a big piece.
You're imagining.
I think beyond so that allows the painting, even though it's confined in a space, I feel like it's not confined in a space.
Right.
So I actually don't treat it like the size of the canvas. I treat it like, that was the only way I can make smaller pieces work.
Yeah. Is there an actual orientation when you begin, or is that something you figure out at the end? Like this could even be portrait. You know what I mean? Like, is that something?
I had a series about 9 years ago called The Infinite Possibilities of the Space Between. God, that's a grandeur word, isn't it?
Too big. Yeah.
But actually,
Incredible. Okay. Wow.
so and actually it was all about the lines going vertically.
Okay. Yeah.
If I spin that now for you, actually, this piece.
Yeah.
You see, you go from, I paint landscapes, I paint light, I paint the movement of light, I paint that sort of color, but you go from, people automatically try to find a grounding point and they build a story out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If I spin that round, which I could do,
Yeah.
and it's the same, it's just a different time. People write a different story.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
They go to a different experience.
Yeah.
They go to a different, what's great. If I do it that way, you're actually orbiting the Earth.
Yeah.
You're on,
No,
you're on Apollo 9 and you're
yeah.
you're going through the layers of the stratosphere.
Yeah.
But you actually then, it's all the same paint.
Right.
You just, how you look at it is a totally different story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you go back to human beings, if you go back to nature, if you go back to anything, go back to playing football, Depends how you look at the fucking thing.
Yeah.
Depends how you look at the pitch. You can create anything out of it. And whilst I'm telling a story to myself when I'm working, when I'm feeling stuff, whatever, I don't want to impose that on people. When you come look at this work or whatever, I want you to feel something, connect with it, and then I'm always fascinated where people go with them. And that's why people like some works and don't particularly like other works. But it's great because they're creating a story from their experiences in their head.
And I think just in what you were saying about making the process the point and exploring through doing, I feel like that's a key element in maybe making those stories for an audience more complex and maybe less predictable. Because, I mean, it sounds like the elements of it are coming from a very subconscious place.
Well, I agree, absolutely. And I think the two greatest, the same thing, I think, actually, that the greatest enemy for me in art, in life, actually in life, because there is no difference between any of these things, is presumption and assumption. I presume they're actually the same thing. When you presume and when you assume, you've already written the story before you've read it. You've read the book just by looking at the cover. You've met somebody and they look a certain way.
Yeah.
And you've written, and now what happens is that when you assume and presume, that's the only thing you can ever be. And I think it stops you from actually, particularly when you deal with human beings, we're so fucking presumptuous and we assume so much, and we presume all artists are some way. We presume all mathematicians are some way.
Yeah.
We presume, which is totally wrong. And it's funny, I learned from staring at, particularly out in Kerry, I have a studio down there, down in Kenmare, Temple No. You know, land, sea and sky, they're not divided into three, and it's not the sky above the land or the sea in the middle. And down there, there's like 50 different skies, and you can wake up and the sky can be below the land across the bay, sitting on the water, depending on the time of day. The land could be above the water. They can be, and they're just constantly moving between them. They're constantly, like, I was going about molecules, but the only difference between the three states is the tightness of the molecules. But they're constantly moving between each other. Where if you just presume, it's great. You look at kids' paintings when they, infants, whatever, it's just madness. Wonderful. And then by the time they're 5 or 6, the sun goes in the top right-hand corner. The sky's there, the tree is there. We sort of teach that. It's a learned behavior. So so when it comes to my work, it's funny, I don't have an above, middle or below. I don't. And as I'm working, I let that develop, and I let the painting develop. And they are completely, they're somewhere between abstract and realism, but it's like, they're not two ends of a line. They're two ends of a circle, like love and hate.
Yeah. I wonder if it's kind of like it probably is like a survival thing of, like, as you say, like especially as kids, like you don't have that need to label or box things or presume things, because I think the help of presuming or assuming something allows you to feel like you've understood it so that you can move on, or that you can like go to something else or use it to your advantage. And I feel like, especially with creating things, that's the hardest thing, especially for me, is to unlearn that whole process of, I actually don't need to do that in order to survive. Like, I feel like it's so hardwired. And it's also kind of like, as like a race on this planet where there's like nature, and nature is unpredictable, and we're trying to survive against that. We need to form our own version of understanding things or predicting things in order to have some sort of safety or feeling of security or survival or whatever. And I feel like that is the part of art that, that like as you get older as well, that's probably why it's really hard to enter into if you do it later in life than if you're always been that way, or if it's something, because you feel like you're putting yourself in danger by doing that.
We see someone's face, we presume. Someone doesn't say this, so George Bush had a saying. It was this thing before the Iraq war or whatever, and he had this phrase, which I think he's probably a good guy, but he had this phrase. As soon as he said it, I went, "Oh fuck!" And he said, "You're either with us or against us. So if you're not with us, then you're the enemy." Which means and there's only two places to be, either with us or against us. Where there's a million places to be. You can be for you, but you can not be about weapons of mass destruction. You can be, and I think when you divide, that's the problem with the world now. Everything, you're either this or that.
Yeah, binary. Yeah,
Binary. Sorry. college student. And maybe that's the world fucking isn't like that.
Yeah.
The human beings aren't like that. There's like 8 billion people on the planet, and every one of them has a billion different ways of doing things, or unique ways,
Yeah.
and a difference, and that's wonderful and amazing.
Yeah.
Where we presume so much and we assume so much. And it's funny, AI and that whole thing is incredible, but it is basing all knowledge on everything that has existed.
Yeah.
It's presuming there's no vision. And I think presumption and assumption, it, basically treats the world in a binary. If you're this,
Yeah.
you look like that, Curtis, so you're obviously that.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Paul, you're an artist, so obviously you think that.
Yeah.
You go, how fucking dare you think that? You
Yeah.
have no idea what I think.
No.
I'm the most fucking normal human being in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why the football analogy is so perfect, because, sports and the idea of games in general, I think, are great comparisons to art, where you have all these rules that appear very binary, as in, if you break them, you'll be penalized, and if you don't, you'll succeed, But it's almost like, if you want to be a standout player of the game, you can't just rely on following the rules really well. It doesn't translate like that,
You see, it's interesting, the rules. So the rules of sport, which are very important and necessary, and I think, as opposed to following the rules, I always think rules are there, but it's all the space between the rules.
Yeah.
Is where you get to play the game and where you get to explore. People like Razzie Rasmussen, the coach, gets a lot of say, but he explores all the space between the rules to try, and great coaches, Pep Guardiola, when he came along, whatever. I mean, he wasn't the first great coach that looks great, but he looked at it. Rinus Michaels, go back to Total Football. I'm obsessed by it. I think Rinus Michaels was great. Where basically, you're left-footed, so you're going to be a left fullback or a left winger. And actually, that player can move there. We can move here. We can actually, everyone, can you do that? Or you do whatever you want. So, they created, Rinus Michaels created sort of a different way of playing football. And then everyone tried to follow him. I mean, I laugh at the moment. Pep Guardiola created, tiki-taki football, whatever, right? And it was brilliant, and he had amazing players. But you look at what goes on in the different leagues and the way they perform. Every coach is brought up to coach the exact same way.
Yeah.
So if you've got a bunch of players who just fundamentally aren't necessarily as good as the other team, why play the game the exact same way?
Yeah.
The other team is going to win. Go and play it differently.
Yeah.
And we scathe people who look at the game differently or try and do things differently.
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? Why are you doing? Because rules actually should give people, as opposed to stopping people, they should give loads of freedom.
Yeah.
Go back to art or go back to music.
Yeah.
You have people you interviewed, you're like, this is how you play music.
Yeah.
Pop songs are 3 minutes and 20 seconds long. They don't have to be. You could do whatever you want within the
It actually helps you express yourself, I think. I mean, I think also the thing is, like, what's different between the sports analogy and also, like, sometimes with art is those rules have been given to you. Like, a lot of the time you're stepping in and someone's gone, this is what the pitch looks like and these are the rules of this game. And then within that you can, like, express yourself. Whereas I found that it's interesting where if you have complete freedom, you have to be the one that makes up the rules of the game in order to, like, then proceed. And I think that's another thing that I found quite debilitating, or like, obviously I wasn't as good at doing that than I thought I would be. Whenever you're in school or college, you're like, when I get out of here, I'll do what I want and all that kind of stuff, and I'll figure it out that way. And then you get out and you're like, I actually don't know how to do what I want. Like, I don't know how to make up the rules of this game. Like, I actually need someone. I think that's often like that's the intersection where it's like, either I quickly go and find someone to tell me these rules again so that I can express myself in between the, whatever, or you sit in that somehow if you have the privilege to, or if you can, and be like, well, if I'm going to make up the rules of this game, I need to know, like, what I want out of it, or what I care about in order for those rules to make sense or whatever. And I think even with, like, your work as well, it's interesting because even just talking about the idea of, like, orientation or scale and all that kind of stuff, they're not rules per se, but they're things that are markers that are along the way that can be played with, but they're still markers. You know what I mean? They're still, we live in a 3D world and this is a canvas. You know what I mean? And these are paints in terms of what the tools I'm using to make this with. And it's like, they're markers, they're rules, they're things that can't be really, they can be added to and changed and played with and stuff like that, but they're the physical limitations you have to work with.
I love cave painting. I find it fascinating because if you think about it, so before there was painting,
Yeah.
so imagine the first person to come along. I'm going to make a mark. I'm going to actually do something
Yeah.
on this wall. And they did it. There was no barometer. There was no judgment. Well, is that good or bad? No one fucking knows if it's good or bad. And that's amazing. It's freedom. It's just physically expressing something. You see, part of the problem with paint was ever is that people say, "Oh, I can't paint. I'm not an artist," or whatever. Every single person is an artist. Every single person can paint. Everyone can do. Who's to say whether it's good or not? Because it's the physical act of doing it is just. So for cave painting, there was no benchmark. There was no barometer. There was no rules.
Yeah.
It just was that.
Yeah.
And there's somehow we have this love for that innocence of you're going to do this, but there's not going to be judged for it. Actually, that piece there, interesting. So when I paint actually pieces, I've a lot of pieces. I actually physically just do it with my hands because it's more difficult.
Right. Yeah.
If it's more difficult, Hughesy will do it.
Yeah.
But I actually thought what it actually did was get me closer to the canvas. Actually, so I actually just everything is just made by my hands and the structures to see if it, and actually it gives you such an amazing feeling when you're doing it. As opposed to just with brushes. And I actually, it gave me a sense of like being a cave painter and some things. And can you create control? What can you do? So actually the funny thing is that sort of has my DNA in some way on it and stuff like that. So
it's incredible. Cave paintings were something that I got really into in college just as a concept. And I remember watching a documentary with Brian Cox, and I think they had just found this, I don't know if this is the earliest or it was like a early example of a cave painting. It was a hand. A young girl had blown paint through the hand to the fingers to create that.
Ash, probably.
Yeah, yeah. And it was interesting just what he was saying about it in terms of not only all the things he just described, which is like the example of like there's no pre-planning to this. There's no all these lofty concepts that go along with often with like making art. But there was also the evidence that this showed of thinking. Like this would have meant as a good marker that this young girl had a concept of time and a concept of the idea of it being a color and not just mud. Often showed like a form of self-expression or a form that this should look nice in some way to me.
That girl did that. And someone beside her or someone came later saw it and felt something. That's powerful. That's what art is. You create something and then somebody feels something. And feeling is different than feeling doesn't have logic in it. It's uncontrolled. That's where we go. You cannot control you. The great phrase, control your feelings. Sometimes controlling your feelings isn't a great thing. Don't control your feelings.
Yeah.
Just feel. That's what that she communicated. She got someone to feel something. Even 30,000 years later, when Brian Cox looked at it, he's going, "Wow!" Just by making a mark.
Yeah.
But you know what the funny thing is? There was probably loads and loads and loads of other people around her who didn't. Because why would you do that? But she did it. That word "did it," doing. She just did it.
Yeah.
And
I think that's that's a really good.
But she didn't think about it too much. She just did it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an underrated thing, especially with art. Like I often have long conversations with some of my friends about this old concept of being like, oh, sure, I could do that or whatever. And that's an age-old thing. But I think it's an age-old thing because people underappreciate the doing of it. I suppose also as a person who makes stuff, you appreciate it way more when you're like, it's easy to look at something and go, oh, I could do that, and then go on with your life and never think about it again. But as somebody who makes stuff and you look at something, you go like, I know how hard it is to get to the end of something. For me, it's really hard to get to the end of something and like finish an idea or finish a concept, probably for a myriad of reasons. But I just have such appreciation for finishing something, and often like coming in here and seeing like works that I know you're saying like the idea of a painting never being finished, and I sort of have that philosophy as well, where like I would never want something I do to be finished necessarily. Like I always return to things I've written before, things I've made before. But there's something about putting a stamp that says done on it.
Well, it's when I let a painting go, and I get emotionally fucking wrecked when I let paintings go because you spend your life with them. At that moment, it will only be, finished is the wrong word because finish is a full stop. It's ready. I'm really, really, at that moment in time, that's something that, it makes me happy because I get it. When I go and see one of my paintings 2 years later or 3 years later, I have two sides, which on the good side, all I can see is faults because that's not a good side of me as a person, but I can't help it. Yeah. But I as a person have changed and moved. So when I'm staring at it, I actually am a different person. So I need it to be slightly different. But then I go, well, no, because actually it's like that girl spraying the hand. At that moment in time, that's what the size of her hand was. That's what she did. If it was 4 years later, 5 years later, she would have done it slightly different. But there's nothing wrong with that. So if I had the ability to take that painting back or whatever, I'd probably do something with it just to make it reflect me now. So that's what I mean when it's not finished. It's like it's like a human being.
Yeah.
You know, you're not finished. You're finished when you're in a coffin. You know, you're done.
What was it like then for you, the very first experience of taking these paintings you'd made and knowing, okay, these are ready to be seen by other people?
I'd been painting and people had been buying them privately. And then when a lovely gallery at Dorky, a lovely lady called Clodagh Hannon, who probably believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. So, will you do a show? And she was, very brave to do it. And she did. And I remember going up and I remember I couldn't look at the work because it was me.
Yeah.
I remember walking in and my head was like this. What's wrong with you, Paul? And I'm not great in public sometimes anyway. I try to be a basket case. And I couldn't look at them. I was embarrassed. I was thinking of all the things of like, people are going to be judging me. I had one painting called Guilt and I painted it and actually, I used to paint a lot in fields and outdoors and private about it, and I actually rolled it up and shoved it in a hedge for 6 months, and just let I believe in fate to see what would happen. So actually, it didn't. So when I pulled it up, Guilt was there, and look back now, it looks like someone's been hung, drawn a cord on their guts are spewed out. It just looked like flesh, and I remember looking at it, going, did I feel guilt? I used to carry a lot of guilt with me. I don't know why. About what? I have no fucking idea. I still don't know. But I remember, so that was the first time I showed it, and I found it extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah.
Really difficult because, I wonder what all these people are looking at. Why are they looking at? It's like looking at my private photographs or something. It just, or as my wife would say, it's like a lot of my paintings are like me turned inside out. People are getting and as I've got older and I've got less self-loathing, I've become okay with who I am. So I don't squirm away from them anymore. I never think of them in terms of, are they good enough? That doesn't fucking enter into my head. If they're on the wall, they're there for a reason. But that was really difficult. It's funny when you're young, it's funny, we always look to go, that's the place I want to get to. So how do I get there? It was back to one of my shows that should come back to that, and I was like, do you ever get there? Was my third show, I think. Do you ever get there? No, you never get there.
Right.
Because you're fucking there.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about someone like you, whatever, it's interesting. I need to scale that mountain. People actually forget you're at the top of a mountain now. And you're there. And there might be another mountain, there might be another mountain, there might be another mountain. And actually you realize there is no summit, it's just the journey. And if you look at it differently and going, you're at the peak of you're at the peak of your performance now, and fucking do it. It's not that you have to wait until you're 35 or 45 to mature or whatever. You're at the peak of your performance now. Now you go and just do. Because in 5 years you'll be a different person, and then it'll be a different thing. So, there's also the thing, you're 25, know your place. Make a short film first. Because, making a long film, Jesus, know your place. And what you have to do is make a short film, and then a slightly longer film, and then you need to go do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know these things take money, but
No.
sometimes they don't. With technology now, so
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the thing. Sometimes we realize is that every day you're at the summit. You're at the summit of something. You're at the summit of what you're capable of doing. And if you write like that and you make films with that attitude, whatever, you suddenly begin to fucking realize, actually, yeah, I can do this.